So the current challenges and benefits of viewability. Anybody who has read my Ad Exchanger articles knows that I have been one of the biggest viewability skeptics. And what's interesting is that's because there have actually been a lot of challenges. And so let's go through a few of those. Number one, there's been a lot of discrepancy between different vendors measuring viewability, even ones that are all MRC accredited. Now, the good news is that seems to be going down, but it's still a challenge. Number two is not everybody agrees on the definition. Even though the MRC definition seems to have a lot of traction, there are other folks who prefer their own definitions. So there's this whole question of the actual definition of viewability, which is a huge challenge. Then there's the simple fact of implementation of an actual viewable transaction, which is hugely manual right now. So you, I'm sure in this room, are very familiar with this process. Someone says, I want to buy only viewable or only a certain percent viewable. And then you have to go into your viewability vendor and you have to look at some placements and you have to make a guess as to what the viewability is going to be of those things. And then you have to run a flight and then you have to adjust it. And then the thing ends and then you're not really sure if you made it or not. You have to do a make good. It's a huge challenge from a management perspective right now. So, and don't even get me started about RTB deals and trying to do viewability in there. It's a nightmare, right? So there's some big challenges, and there's some reasons why people have been skeptical about it. But I've come around to the idea that this is actually something that's going to be really, really good for the industry and really good for the publishers in this room. Thank you, Randall. That was just for you. You can pay me later. And I've come around for a bunch of reasons, but let's talk about some of the positive things that are happening. Number one, we did a programmatic trust study recently, and we actually polled a lot of publishers and asked them whether they thought viewability was a good thing or a bad thing overall. And 92% of the publishers said they thought it was a good thing for their businesses, which I think is a tremendous number. That means there's a lot of acceptance that this is something that we have to do. And it seems clear that for the publishers, especially the publishers in this room that typically have much higher than average viewability, it's going to be good because market share is going to shift towards the folks that have the higher viewability, that are delivering the kind of metrics that the buyers are looking for. So that makes sense. So what are some of the things that have to happen in order for this to start to become like reasonable? Well, of course the vendors have to start getting their definitions together, and that's all happening. But from the perspective of the folks in this room, you have to think about how can you make sure that viewability is measured in everything you do, from top to bottom of your stack, from the buy side all the way through to the sell side. So you want to make sure that viewability is incorporated into the stacks that you're using. So that's one key thing. The next thing is going to be forecasting on your viewability. Does your forecasting allow you to actually place a campaign or look at a way that you might traffic something and decide, am I going to hit a particular viewability metric or a viewability number? So that's another really key piece to look at. And then finally, when it comes to RTB, it's really important that viewability get incorporated into the RTB standards and into your into your RTB stacks. And just, a small plug is AppNexus just a couple weeks ago announced that in our stack, every single impression that we see that goes through our exchange gets a viewability score. So the people who are buying can now see, is this a 90% viewable placement, a 20% viewable placement? How am I going to bid based on that? Right? So these are some of the things that we can get to what we all consider, I think, the holy grail of viewability, which is how can I make a transaction with a viewability metric just as easy and seamless to traffic and manage as one that's based on pure impressions. That's the goal. Thank you.